Baldur's Gate 3 has a massive number of choices and consequences that you can explore on your journey across Faerun, but some decisions have a bit more weight than others. In this video, we're going to explore the 9 most difficult choices you'll have to make in Baldur's Gate 3. We're going to explore everything from the serious to the silly. Many of these decisions haunt my dreams as I wonder whether I did the right thing. I'll be approaching this from the perspective of a first playthrough, without the foresight of knowing how these choices play out. Because obviously, if you already know what's going to happen, you may make a different decision. But I've rambled on long enough, let's dive into the list. Number 1. The Druids Grove. The conflict in the Emerald Grove seems like a pretty cut and dry scenario at first glance. Characters like Kaga and the goblins are clearly in the wrong, while the peaceful druids and tieflings are just trying to chill, bro. So naturally, I lean towards taking out the absolute leaders and making sure Kaga doesn't complete the Rite of Thorns. However, now that I've experienced another side of the quest, where you can recruit a hot dark elf to fight alongside you, my perspective has changed quite a bit, as now I'm thoroughly down bad. If you've played Mass Effect before and embraced eternity with Liara, then you already know, once you go blue, you always stay true. Now compare Minthara to the companion you get instead if you side with the Druids. Halsin is a big blubbering bummer who's always rambling on about shadow curses and demon children. It's always shadow curse this and Thaniel that. It's just a real fucking buzzkill, man. So who would you rather hang out with? The hot drow Dami Mommy, or this curse-obsessed loser? I, for one, feel the temptation of the dark side.
And you shall have me.
Number 2. Lae'zel and the Zaithisk. Once you recruit Lae'zel into your party, she just won't shut up about locating a Githyanki creche and getting purified with the Zaithisk. So I decided to humor my main tank by taking a trip through the mountainside to her supposed purification. Unfortunately for us, the Zaithisk appears to be a potentially deadly device where the subject may not survive the removal of the tadpole. But Lae'zel is determined, so who are we to stand in her way? Things immediately get scary once the Zaithisk starts doing its magic. On a first playthrough, this scene is incredibly intense, and I was fully convinced that Lae'zel was going to die once she strapped into the chair. On top of that, most persuasion dialogue options require an insane 30 difficulty check to pass. So if you're not buffed up with the Riz, it's incredibly difficult to get her to step away before the procedure is complete. Fortunately for us, Lae'zel will get saved by a Deus Ex Machina, as the Dream Guardian will step in to destroy the Zaithisk before it can complete its voodoo magic. In hindsight, the scene doesn't carry as much weight since I now know that Lae'zel isn't gonna die, but on my first playthrough, this was super intense. Number 3. Shadowheart's parents. Let's jump over to Act 3 real quick to discuss the conclusion of Shadowheart's personal quest. And oh boy, this one is an emotional roller coaster. For this iteration, we're going to assume that Shadowheart did not fulfill Shar's will at the end of Act 2, because the quest is a little bit different if she becomes a Dark Justiciar. Once you reach Baldur's Gate, Shadowheart will return to the House of Grief to confront her former comrades, including the Mother Superior, who turns out to be Viconia, a potential companion character from the original Baldur's Gate games. Assuming you don't turn Shadowheart over to Viconia, the conversation ends in violence, and afterwards Shadowheart will discover her parents bound by magic in the central temple chamber. But in a sick twist of fate, Shadowheart is presented with a terrible decision by Lady Shar. If she saves her parents, she will be forever cursed with the painful mark of Shar and plagued by the Lady of Darkness until the end of her life. Or she could let her parents, who are both very old now, die and get turned into balls of light that free her from the curse. It's an emotional scene and a difficult decision to make, especially considering her parents are actively encouraging Shadowheart to sacrifice them because they obviously don't want their daughter to be eternally cursed. I've experienced both outcomes at this point, and I still don't know which decision feels best, because either way, Shadowheart is going to experience immense pain and loss. Number 4. Philomeen the Trigger-Happy Gnome. When you reach Grimforge near the end of Act 1, you can receive a quest to retrieve explosives from an escaped gnome slave named Philomeen. After finding her hiding spot, she'll threaten to blow herself up unless you let her walk out with a shit ton of explosives. Her dialogue here is incredibly ominous.
A fistful of fire that can turn cities to dust. Well, it's real. And I need to bring it back to Baldur's Gate. We're freedom fighters. We need this powder to prove a point. To people who really need a point proven to them. Let me go, and you'll be on the right side of history. That's all I can say.
Like, bro, who needs to learn a lesson? What is she planning? Is she gonna commit an act of terrorism against potential allies in the future? I really felt like I couldn't possibly let her walk out of this room with a giant bomb and a one-way ticket to Baldur's Gate. So I decided to decline her deal, but I still wonder if I made the right choice here. Now that I've seen Wulbren and the gnomes trying to fight against Gortash's Steel Watch, I suspect that was her target, but without that advanced knowledge, this was an incredibly difficult decision to make here in the moment. Number 5. The Fate of True Soul Nere. Staying on the theme of the Grimforge, the big quest for this zone is deciding the fate of True Soul Nere, a drow absolutist who's been trapped under the rubble of an ancient Sharan temple. A lot of people want to see this guy dead. The Myconids, some of the Dwagar, and even many of your party members. But as the old saying goes, keep your friends close and enemies closer, so I wondered about the possibilities of keeping this guy in my back pocket, considering we were about to march on Ketheric Thorm's stronghold at Moonrise Towers. Many of the outcomes are appealing here. I like the idea of allying with Nere to get closer to the Absolutists. Plus, it's kind of badass to watch Nere force choke Thryn like a Sith Lord.
Nere pities you, Thryn. Your errors and excuses. And your sorry end. Hells.
But I also kind of like the idea of siding with the Dwagar, who just wants to ransack his corpse. That way you can get some allies in the fight against Nere, and double back to claim another reward from the Myconids. Decisions. I'll be pondering this in an insomniatic state tonight for sure. Speaking of things that keep me up at night, here's a bonus one. While exploring the Blighted Village, you'll come across this locked barn. One of my biggest regrets in Baldur's Gate 3 was making the choice to open that door. Because once you cross that threshold and trigger the abominable cutscene that awaits you, you'll never be able to unsee it. I'll just say it involves a bugbear and a troll and leave it at that. Trust me, bro, don't look behind this door. And if you did, don't say I didn't warn you. Number 6. Shadowheart vs. Nightsong. Towards the end of Act 2, you'll track down a supposed relic that is the source of Ketheric's immortality. It turns out that this relic is no relic at all, but actually an Aasimar daughter of Selûne called Nightsong. The obvious good choice here is to free Nightsong, thus robbing Ketheric of immortality and winning over a powerful ally. However, if Shadowheart is in your party, she'll be determined to kill Nightsong in the name of Lady Shar. This is Shadowheart's life work to fulfill the will of Lady Shar and become a full-blown Dark Justiciar. And oh boy, if you try to stand in her way, she is not happy about it.
If I have to step over your corpse to fulfill what Lady Shar asks of me, so be it. Your choice.
Man, this scene was intense on my first playthrough. I really did not want to lose Shadowheart, especially considering my character was pursuing her romantically. But I also knew that killing Nightsong was just wrong. Thankfully, it is possible to convince Shadowheart to stay her hand and forsake Lady Shar, which puts her on a path to redemption. But I was really unsure about how this would play out on my first playthrough, so this conversation was intense. Number 7. Spare Viconia or kill her. At the end of Shadowheart's quest in Act 3, aside from deciding the fate of Shadowheart's parents, you'll also need to choose life or death for the Mother Superior Viconia. Had I not played Baldur's Gate 1 and 2, this decision might have been easier, but I can't forget saving Viconia from an angry mob in Athkatla in Baldur's Gate 2, and all the fun adventures I had with her and my party. Maybe I've just got a soft spot for evil drow baddies and that dark feminine energy. Viconia also seems to want Shadowheart to kill her, kind of as a way to prove Shadowheart is still consumed by darkness and cannot escape her training. So Viconia kind of wins here if you kill her, which makes me lean towards sparing her instead.
What are you doing? Come back and finish this yourself.
You owe me that.
Let go, Mother. Embrace loss.
However, if you kill Viconia, you get some awesome gear. For starters, you get a legendary shield, which gives you incredible protection against spells, as well as a passive counterattack to sneak in extra damage against melee enemies that target you. On top of that, you get a great set of spellcaster robes, which buffs stealth checks and Shield of Faith. Although the cleavage doesn't quite match the aesthetic on male characters. But hey, you gotta take what you can get, am I right? Number 8. Spaw vs. Glut. This next one involves the leadership of the Myconid colony in the Underdark. There are two leaders vying for power, Spaw and Glut. On the one hand, Spaw is incredibly kind and generous to us, offering us a great reward for our assistance. He also turns up with some kind of ecstasy spores, so if you like to party, then this guy's great. But on the other hand, I understand Glut's frustration at how Spaw has been running things. You can argue that Spaw's weakness as a leader led to the deaths of many of his people at the hands of the Dwagar. So maybe Glut would be a better leader that could protect the Myconids. At the same time, Glut seems a bit unhinged and just out for revenge. So I don't know, this decision was a tough one for me. Number 9. Wyll Soul or his pops. I saved the toughest one for last. At the end of Act 2, we discover that Wyll's father, Duke Ravengard, has been infected with a tadpole and is now the pawn of Gortash in Worm's Rock. After Gortash's coronation, Ravengard is whisked away to a prison where Gortash will most certainly kill the man. Wyll wants us to save his father, and Mizora proposes a bold plan. In exchange for helping us locate Wyll's father, Mizora wants Wyll to sign a new contract with her and provide his soul as part of the bargain. Similar to this Shadowheart decision, I really struggled with making the right call here. On the one hand, committing your eternal soul to Mizora is a terrible fate, considering failure in any task can cause you to be turned into a lump of flesh, mindlessly fighting in the blood war for all eternity. But on the other hand, Wyll seems like the kind of guy who would never ever forgive himself for abandoning his father to Gortash's goons. Ultimately, I decided to have Wyll sign the contract, but I can't help but feel like I made the wrong choice here. So there you have it, 9 decisions in Baldur's Gate 3 that keep me up at night. If you liked this video, be sure to subscribe to Big Dan Gaming for more BG3 and RPG content. Big shout out to all the channel members for supporting my videos. Until next time, this has been Big Dan. I should go.